Disgusting. Fucking disgusting pieces of dirt.
I mean, you got to just realize what's going to happen here. Is Jay-Z going to do anything to Nicki Minaj? She's making it very clear on what she's coming out with. So this is the part that you got to watch very closely on how Trump's handled this. Now, don't get me wrong. We've seen the clips that there was a relationship, that they would talk and the exchange and all this other stuff. Yes.
The war just turned nuclear music, and someone is about to lose everything. Everyone thought this was just another celebrity meltdown, another loud rant lost in the music feed. It isn't. What just surface changes the balance. Nicki Minaj publicly freezes her own album, tags Jay-Z by name, calls the Grammys a ritual, and reignites music. A feud that Wendy Williams once lit on air when she mocked Minaj's husband as a convicted offender. Screenshots are spreading, old clips are resurfacing, and insiders whisper that contracts, lawsuits, and reputations are now on the line. Music. There's talk of $100 to $20 million tied to Tidal, a $500, $3,000.
Well, y'all, Nicki Minaj is back on X, and she's coming for Jay-Z. So in a series of tweets, Nicki Minaj is claiming that Jay-Z owes her $100 to $200 million so far.
Her judgment hanging over Minaj, and a guardianship that has Wendy confined while she calls her residence a luxury prison. Minaj accuses mogul of corruption while critics point to her own household history. The silence from the top is deafening. And if this is retaliation, it hasn't even reached its final target yet. And this is where it stops being noise and starts looking deliberate. Wendy Williams goes on air days after Nicki Minaj quietly marries Kenneth Petty and does what she has always done best. She pulls the record, reads it cold, and strips the fairy tale down to a rap sheet. She names the prison time, the past music conviction, the history that refuses to stay buried. 2 days after the ceremony, she says he served 7 years and is a registered music offender, then lets the sarcasm hang. It lands exactly where it is meant to land. The marriage stops being a romance and becomes a liability in real time. People close to the situation insist that was the moment the tone shifted from gossip to humiliation. Music Minaj has already built her brand on control and dominance, on never drinking the pickle juice handed to her. Now the narrative is out of her hands, and it is being framed by someone who made a career exposing weak spots. The official version says, "This is just talk show fodder, a host doing her job," but that explanation doesn't survive contact with what happens next. Minaj doesn't offer a measured rebuttal. She detonates. Music on Queen Radio. She doesn't just defend her husband. She dismantles Wendy's private life, calls her demonic.
They looking good, breaking records, you going viral for having a weird-shaped ass, and you ain't dropped no music that's doing well in a long time, and now you're no longer the reigning queen of anything. That's now debatable.
But nah,
she acting up. She don't know how to handle it. If you a queen sitting on the top of the world, bro, for 15 years with Lil Wayne and Drake, unopposed. That's like you running your hood for a decade, 15 years, and then a group of little young get the cracking, and you like,
yeah, but you
pay no homage.
Private life, calls her demonic, and drags her failed marriage into the open with surgical cruelty. She reframes the criticism as envy, bitterness, moral rot. It is not a clapback. It is a public execution of credibility. Industry observers note the speed of music at the escalation, the refusal to de-escalate. The message is clear. If you question my choices, I will question your entire existence. That kind of retaliation changes the temperature. Music. It tells everyone watching that this is no longer about a wedding. It is about power, respect, and who gets to define reality. And once that line is crossed, it rarely gets uncrossed. Here's where it starts to bend. Instead of cooling off after the Wendy exchange, Minaj Music expands the battlefield. Early one Wednesday morning, she posts that she will not release her forthcoming album and tags Jay-Z directly, writing that she is done and hoping he is happy. Now this is not a subtweet. It is a public naming of a mogul whose company she is not even signed to. The album in question is still being promised for March 27, 2026, and she has reiterated that date multiple times in late September and early October. Now it is pulled in a flash. Industry sources say moves like that are not impulsive unless there is leverage being applied behind the scenes. She alleges between $100 and $200 million tied to Tidal and
unpaid stakes. She suggests Roc Nation try to sign her.
How she feels. She feels like blogs and online platforms don't touch what she's saying, and they don't cover all of her words fully because it's Jay-Z and Roc Nation.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have no idea about their business, but if someone owed me $200 million, then I would be in court, not on X. And I guarantee you, if she ever took that to court, that would be a huge...
Try to sign her and failed. That is no longer a personal feud. That is a money accusation with a number attached. And the numbers matter because they anchor the fury. 100 to 200 million is not social media drama. It is boardroom scale. The Tidal sale to Jack Dorsey's company for $297 million in 2021 sits there like a receipt. Minaj's posts link that history to her own claims of being owed a massive share. She goes further, targeting Roc Nation's chief executive Desire Perez by name, declaring that her time is up. When a security guard in Germany files to force the sale of Minaj's California home to recover $53,000 tied to an alleged assault case, that filing surfaces in mid-October and circulates alongside her accusations. It becomes part of the narrative, whether she likes it or not. Music, people watching begin to connect dots that were not meant to be connected. Is this a billionaire dispute dressed up as activism, or is this financial pressure exploding into public war? But Minaj does not stop at money. On Grammy night, she posts that the awards ceremony is a ritual and warns that it will backfire. She invokes faith, judgment, music, condemnation. She escalates to accusations against Jay-Z that cross into territory no artist casually enters, labeling him a predator and attaching old photographs of him with Aaliyah and Beyonce to make her case. The photos are from
Nicki Minaj. She went on another Twitter rant, and she still got Jay-Z and Roc Nation in every tweet. She be wilding on them. I ain't gonna lie, I ain't never seen nobody come at Jay-Z this hard.
I'm like,
to make her case. The photos are from 2000, from 1996 and 1997, dragged back into circulation with ages scribbled across them like evidence boards. The Grammys do not respond. Jay-Z does not respond. That silence becomes its own character in the story. Music, meanwhile, critics resurface the record of Minaj's own family, a brother sentenced to 25 years in 2020 for assaulting an 11-year-old, a husband with a conviction that placed him on registries. Music, the backlash is immediate and ruthless. That backlash is not random. It lands precisely where Minaj's new moral crusade is most vulnerable. As she accuses institutions of protecting dangerous men, commenters point to the men closest to her. Music, the contradiction does not need to be spelled out. It is implied in every repost. Insiders say this is the turning point where sympathy fractures. Up until now, she can be framed as a whistleblower. After Music This, she is framed as hypocritical. And here's where the optics tighten. She insists she will not release the album until her contract is renegotiated, and until she exposes what she calls sabotage uncovered by an investigation involving Billboard. The word sabotage appears repeatedly. Surveillance is meant.
John Legend, Billie Eilish, Phineas, Nicki Minaj is not here. She is not here. She is still at the White House with Donald Trump discussing very important issues.
Surveillance is mentioned, listening devices, car tags, hacked accounts. The narrative shifts from grievance to siege. It becomes harder to separate justified anger from isolation. Meanwhile, Wendy's name does not disappear from the background. Music lingers because of what happens to her next. In 2022, she is placed under court-appointed guardianship. In 2024, her guardian publicly reveals a diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia and progressive aphasia. She appears at a fifth-floor window of her assisted living facility and drops a handwritten note that reads, "Help, Music, Wendy." The image spreads faster than any rant. She calls the coterie a luxury prison on the radio. She complains that she cannot receive calls on her landline. These are documented moments, not whispers, and when you place them beside the memory of her mocking Minaj's marriage, the symmetry is unsettling. The woman who warned about reputational contamination is now fighting for control of her own narrative. Music. People close to the situation say that is why the old clip of Wendy reading Petty's history keeps resurfacing. It feels prophetic to some and cruel to others. Did she identify a vulnerability that would haunt Minaj, or did she ignite a chain reaction that never stopped burning because after that exchange, Minaj's public
looks at Wendy and says, you know, you had a great career. Your career is over. It is never coming back. You're done. Why would a judge?
Minaj's public persona hardens? Music. She frames criticism as spiritual warfare. She aligns herself politically in ways that alienate former allies. She attends a White House event and calls herself the president's #1 fan. Trevor Noah jokes about her absence at the Grammys, and she unleashes a barrage of posts targeting him and others. The attacks widen Lizzo. Music. Chrissy Teigen, Billy Porter. The circle of enemies expands so rapidly that it becomes a map of the music industry itself. That is not random behavior. That is siege mentality. And here's where people start asking questions. If this is all performance, why risk real contracts? If it is calculated, why trigger legal exposure? If it is reactive, why does it keep targeting the same power centers? Rock Nation, the Grammys, Billboard. Industry veterans note that Jay-Z's camp remains silent through all of it. Silence can be strategy. It can also be confidence. The lack of response forces Minaj to fill the vacuum with more accusations. Each post raises the stakes. Each allegation makes backing down harder. Meanwhile, Wendy's guardianship costs $25,800 a month for Music, a memory care unit she says she does not belong in. Her estate pays hourly rates between $250 and $450 for legal oversight. Money drains quietly while both women publicly fight for narrative.
I've always spoken to her, and she's always wanted me to spend her money.
Women publicly fight for narrative control. That is the complication sitting at the center of this story. One woman accuses the industry of sabotage and financial betrayal, while the other accuses the system of imprisoning her under the guise of protection. Music. Both invoke control. Both talk about forces operating behind closed doors. Music, and yet, when Minaj's accusations intensify, it is her own past that gets weaponized against her. When Wendy, Music, demands freedom, it is her diagnosis that gets weaponized against her. The official explanations are neat. A volatile artist venting, a vulnerable host being cared for. But the timing, the escalation, the financial pressure, and the reputational blows do not. Music sit neatly together. The silence from the top remains intact. And the more it remains intact, the more the battlefield looks less like chaos and more like a controlled demolition that is still unfolding. And once you zoom out, the pattern refuses to stay small. Nicki Minaj does not just fight critics. She fights institutions. She positions herself as the lone voice against a machine she insists is rigged, music, corrupt, and spiritually rotten. That posture did not appear overnight. It grows steadily as doors appear to close. She speaks about paid moles inside her circle. She hints that her documentary was sabotaged because it would expose abuse. She claims projects are being stalled to drain her financially until she begs for help. Music. Industry sources insist that when an artist starts using language like surveillance, conspiracy, music, and sabotage, it signals either paranoia or pressure. But here's the problem. Pressure and paranoia can look identical from the outside. Music. And in an industry built on non-disclosure agreements and quiet blacklists, the absence of visible proof does not mean the absence of consequence. Wendy Williams, for her part, has spent decades weaponizing other people's secrets. She builds a career on saying what others will not. That reputation makes her both feared and valuable. When she clashes with hip-hop royalty in the past, she survives. When she is immortalized in lyrics and diss tracks, she thrives. The machine tolerates her as long as she is useful. But now she is no longer the person holding the microphone. She is the person whose mental state is debated in court filings and documentary footage. Her own words are filtered through guardians, attorneys, and medical assessments. She insists she is not cognitively impaired. Others insist she is. That contradiction is not abstract. It determines who controls her estate.
Thinking it's going to have to start with an exorcism.
Oh
Exorcism.
my God,
There's
dang.
Roman,
You think
and
she
there's a lot of-
possessed?
What y'all think?
I don't think an exorcism is needed.
I thought maybe a benefit concert. But I also talked.
Donation, definitely. Donation.
Of course,
always thought
you
with a
have
donation.
to. Yeah, that's the foundation of the start. And then you got.
It determines who controls her estate. Music, her visitors, her phone, her freedom. For someone who once dictated narratives, losing that control is not just personal, it is existential. The uncomfortable symmetry between these two women begins to look less accidental and more instructive. Both build brands on confrontation. Music both publicly challenge powerful men. Both see their private lives dragged into the open when their accusations intensify. Music both become defined by their perceived instability once they stop playing along. Insiders, music, point to the timing. When Minaj escalates her feud with Roc Nation and attaches enormous financial claims to it, counter-narratives about her family history surge back into headlines. When Wendy begins calling her residents a prison and demanding autonomy, medical diagnoses surface in the press, and footage of her most vulnerable moments circulates widely. The pattern does not prove coordination. Music suggests leverage. In a system where reputation equals currency, undermining credibility is often cheaper than filing a lawsuit. Money threads through all of it. Minaj frames her conflict in terms of unpaid stakes.
Apparently, Nicki Minaj has dragged Jay-Z to filth. She blasts him for being evil and spiteful.
Minaj frames her conflict in terms of unpaid stakes in stalled releases. Wendy's situation revolves around who signs checks and who decides how those checks are spent. Her music estate covers monthly housing costs that rival Manhattan penthouses, plus hourly legal oversight that accumulates quietly in the background. The guardianship arrangement, initially described as temporary, becomes indefinite after she revokes her consent. That word indefinite does not fade easily. It signals that exit is no longer voluntary. Music for Minaj, the withheld album becomes a bargaining chip. For Wendy, autonomy becomes one. In both cases, control over output and access is central. Who decides when an album drops? Who decides when a former host leaves her? Music building. Who decides which story reaches the public first? People close to Minaj say she believes she is being punished for refusing to align with certain interests. Music. She claims she is in the best musical place of her life, even as she threatens to pull the project entirely. Music. That contradiction reads a strategy to some and instability to others.